My name is Noemi. I come from Belgium and I'm originally from Romania. I come from the community building field. I do community management in my professional life, and our goal as a global network of change makers is to work towards sustainable social good projects. That means projects that are able to have impact in their local context but also generate enough compensation for the people who do hard work on the ground.
Could you be more specific? What do you refer by causing impact?
Yes, I mean making a difference through your work for the people around you, not just for yourself or for the project team, but setting in chain some sort of reaction. So I've seen a lot of groups acting locally but also trying to make a difference internationally that spend a lot of time trying to organize themselves. And what I found is that you do that at the cost of working on your project. So I think the less time we spend thinking about how to organize and the more time we put into just trying out things, some of them might work and some not, will give us more information and more improvement in the way we work. So my theory is that you need a very agile way of networking and existing as a global network that enables people to do things. So the more freedom you create in the network, even if it is maybe less organized, the better it is, especially in the early days when you want to create enough energy and that sort of critical mass that will, take the message forward. So my work has been internationally. I'm part of running some sort of processes for a global network of changemakers, very similar to Nellis's. And I think where we would stand to gain, me speaking as a Nellis member right now, is if we formalize minimally the engagement that people have in the network and try to see where support is needed in order for their work to continue. So rather than looking at what structure could fit, looking at what we need and then model that on a structure, maybe later on, maybe not now. Yes, I think what works in general is storytelling, good storytelling, like telling the story even in a multimedia format or text, or showing people's faces, like who are the people that drive this change, championing that and then sending it across the network so that the message circulates. And the more you do that, the more other people are inspired to step up. Like clean, nice storytelling, high quality storytelling, using the channels of the organization primarily, but also media outlets that are suited and that are compatible in their values with what Nellis is doing. It's the first thing that I could think about right now.
Have you identified any specific storytelling method that you would like to talk about? What you do?
So in terms of how the story looks like, I think that's something for content managers to look at. If you have pictures or texts or visuals, I think a combination of this works. But the way I've seen it work interestingly in a network is by having people in the community that play community journalists. So they are the ones going out and interviewing their peers who do the work, because they know exactly more about that work. So they know what questions to ask that are interesting for the community, so that the story is not like, what are you working towards, who's engaged, what kind of impact have you seen? Because that kind of skeleton, I think it's quite rudimentary these days. I think it's more interesting to ask people about their challenges, and somebody that is a peer can ask that better. I'm not sure if there is a recipe. I think a lot of the people in the network, a lot of the work of the people in the network has to do with building some sort of a community locally, and that is not just with people around sustainability. So you do, performing arts for change. That means you have people in the audience that are, exposed to some sort of new message. The question is, do you want them to become active participants, and in what ways? You could have a lot of projects that are focused on building a community of volunteers around it, where people get actively involved in the project work itself, so that they are not audiences or spectators, they are part of the champions of that project. But that depends on the cost of volunteering in different parts of the world. Somewhere, in some parts it's easier to just volunteer a few hours of your week. In other parts, people are so busy, providing for their basic needs that volunteering is quite expensive. So, of course, what we do in our network is, trying to get people to be no spectators. But I don't think we have so much time to convince the people that need to be convinced the hardest. I think what we do is it's incremental, you have different layers. There's somebody that's closer to you, that's already championing things, and then they work with some other people that are already, have some exposure, and it's easier to build critical mass like this than go straight for people who are, very far off on the spectrum. It's more expensive to reach them, because nobody will fund 3-year programs when you're doing innovative work. People just fund prototypes, which means that you can barely scratch the surface of who's actually doing this work and connect isolated projects and movements.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm more radical in this, I have to say. I don't care about the distinction between member and not member, or you're in or you're out. I'm all in for radical openness, and I've seen that work better, even though you have more chaos in your system, but that's not necessarily bad. People don't know exactly what their place is, but in the end, people who want to contribute, in my experience, they will contribute anyway, with or without membership cards.
The goals and the purpose, which are really driving,
Yes.
will be there.
Yes. If you have anyway a structure that now does not allow for radical openness and this much chaos, what I would focus on is people that are leaders in their communities and that run these Nellis-driven projects, creating spaces, maybe separate online groups, or growing their community in a way that those people feel like Nellis members. And then if somebody needs more to be able to become more actively engaged, give it to them. If not, you make yourself responsible to translate the knowledge from that and bring it back to the center, you as an intermediary. So you manage your relationship with your community, and you see what the demands are on the ground. But you don't say, this is where we close, this is me, an Ellis member, and this is you, an Ellis, a participant in an Ellis event. You come to the event, hey, you're part of the Ellis network, and that keeps it open, right? And then when it comes to business cards and memberships and whatever, then you can discuss it on a case-by-case basis, so that you don't shut people off from the first moment, even though your organizational structure is maybe a bit rigid.
What elements do you feel are like the most important ones
In terms of the structure of the organization and the network?
Organizational infrastructures, yes.
Ideally, but this is bias, so it comes from me as an individual, because nobody has the perfect system, right? It is, and I will say it again, radical openness, letting everybody who wants to be part of it be part of it. Freedom to do things, I think, is very important, not having to ask for permission too much. I have a good friend that's always saying, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So you start doing things, and if something goes wrong, then you just apologize and you move on, because that gives you more leeway. Try out things, don't think about it too much. If you want to do some action, use the structure to your favor, or just go out there and do things. This would be radical openness, freedom, access to information, individual empowerment of the people who are part of the network, I think, is important. Not feel like they depend too much on the network or the structure, but use that as a complementary to what it is that they're doing, so that there's not a lot of dependency, which means that the network breaks if they go out, or if they break if the network is no longer supporting them. I think that's really unhealthy.
What do you think are like the challenges, or how do you be critical about the process that's been going in this?
I saw from the people that I've been speaking to, informally, a need to have some sort of a structure, because it feels like the time has come for that, because in the previous years there was like a lot of disorganized, but in a fun, creative way, let's see what happens, and we're all contributing to shaping the organization as it moves along, and that's great. But now the time has come to set some things into place so that people understand better what it is that they are part of. This is what came across for me. Dangers. I think there is a risk of each of us not delivering on our commitments because you make them in a state of enthusiasm and high energy, but that is not unheard of and it happens often, and I think we should just focus on the commitments that we can honor and not those that we can't honor. So just take it as, the inevitable, some inevitable loss. Okay, works. Okay, thank you.